Alright, with everything I went over in the previous videos, I actually forgot to go over the database manager. This is an external tool built in C# that is used to create and manage the data side of everything that has to do with the actual RPG, from items to things like that to events, setting up characters, all of that. One thing I want to note is the creation of the actual database happens within the stored procedures.cs. So any table or any new SQL table that I want to create is created here via a structure. So if we just look at the weapons real quick, actually let me go down to it. So right now a table is defined with a structure, with the database query, the different columns I want to have for that actual database. Within that structure, you have to initialize your variables to make sure that everything is set to whatever the default should be. You have to specify your column names, and with that you also have to specify a list that says this is what these columns, these are the data types, or I guess column types, that these entries will be in the actual database. And then this actually creates the actual table. And within that, the create table that is executed when you actually call the new function to create a database is what's used to actually create your table in the database. So if we go up here, everything we do here is the actual creation of the database right here. So this will create the weapons entry and all of the other tables that I have created. If you look here, I preset some of the default settings for certain tables and I actually insert them inside the actual database. So if you want to change any of the default values and anything like that, you can do it here. And pretty much this is just pretty much a complete initialization of database columns, database settings, what have you. So even if you want to modify what type of events you have, you can come here to change that. So if we can start this up. There's a lot of different little levels of customizations that you can do. So right now I'm going to create a new database, and I'm just going to create it in the base area. By default, the source database should always be inside your project, your content folder, RPG engine, well, RPG_system inside of data store, and it should be called source.rpgdb. But for this case, I'm just going to make it right here in the main directory. Alright, so now it should be created. I'm going to go and open it. And now what we have here, I have a building layout system, which is just a way of creating building layouts from just this general tile sets. Now note, this is still experimental. I've just been playing around with this, trying to, you know, get something that can help me make buildings in general better. I can come in here, generate a new layout. Right now, let me set my save path. I'm just going to pick one of the ones that already exist. And these are all the buildings I've already created, just playing around. But if you notice, when I load them up, The buildings are set to different height and width for this grid. And pretty much what you can do is come in here, you can place a floor down, you can place a blank spot, or just a complete null in general. Blank spots are pretty much holes in the ground, where null is just no object whatsoever. You can add stairs if you want, and click and rotate pretty much to say which way you want these stairs to be made. Same thing with these little border walls. Think of it as like a like an external like awning or something on a roof. You got internal walls, you got roof parts, you got just regular deco that I could just think of to be able to put in a room. These are lights, even though they don't look like lights, but these are lights. But these are all the little things that you can use to actually create a building. So if I go through, just load this up real quick. If I go through the mansion, and these are all the different levels. So this is the ground level, which are made of little external walls and pretty much nothing in the middle, because this is just like an external like base of a building in general. So I only need the external areas of that. If we go up, oops, clicked the wrong thing. If we go up one level, we get the first floor of the house. So we have rails going all on the outside, if you can see here. We have little boxes on the inside of the house. We have lamps on the inside of the house. I think these are rugs, if I can remember correctly. We have a TV. We have windows over here. And this is one of the buildings you can just generate, and it generates the entire building with whatever mesh replacements that you want in the system. As I said before, this is still experimental. I'm still trying to make everything as efficient with this, but for right now, it's just there to play around with. If you can make more efficient meshes, have at it. But I'm trying to see if I can get a balance between something that looks good and is as efficient as possible, as well as having something that can go down to an LOD of just being a flat billboard. I want to try to see if I can use the HLOD system that Unreal has in it now to be able to take a house that I generate and just make a single mesh out of it when you leave, far back enough to be able to not need the details of the actual house in general. So until I can figure all that out, this is still stay experimental. We have the initialization data. So this page will tell you in general who are the starting actors in your party when you create a new game, what's the starting map, how much money you're going to start with, what time of day you want the game to start at, the different volume levels you want to be the default, whether you're going to have subtitles on or not, auto replay, 24-hour time of day, cheats. These are just stand-ins right now. These aren't actually being used. They're just here as things that I could think of for settings in general. So if you want to go and change those, you can. The battle mode doesn't really matter anymore because I've removed that from the main system. This was back when I was trying to cover too many aspects of an RPG at once, and I just I made the system a little bit overblown. So now I've pulled that back and made it as simple as possible to be able to have other people come and excuse me, add their own changes into the system. We have events, and when I go over the events, I'm actually going to load one of my pre-made ones so I can go through everything there is to make it. But this is where you can pretty much stack different event triggers together to make a sequence of events. If anyone's familiar with RPG Maker and things like that, it's kind of in the same vein of that type of system to be able to stack these events, have these fire in these order. You can enable and disable other events at the end of an event stream to be able to create to be able to create some kind of quest system and things like that, so that way you can have one event enable 2 or 3 other events, blah blah blah. You know, finish one and they lock off the other events. You know, different things like that. If you go to classes, the class is the base level of an actual actor, and in general, just anyone that's going to have any kind of fighting mechanic or anything in your game. This is going to be the base class that it uses for its base stats, and everything else just builds on top of that. I'm actually going to open the example project now so I can show that off. Let's see. Okay, so I'll come back here. So with the classes, if I go in here, this is a warrior class. When it comes to stats, I try to keep everything to the same ratio as most games I've played, where 10 is the maximum stat that you start with, which means that's an A class or an S class stat, and then it goes all the way down to F class stats based on, you know, however you want to divvy up your stat progressions in general. Each of these are uses a natural log to be able to give some kind of control on the progression of a stat as you level up. You can actually change the level down here to see how your stat will progress. Me in general, I try to play around with the numbers, especially for like HP, because I have an ideal curve of how much HP I want the enemies to have, the players to have, going all the way up to probably end game, which would be anywhere between like level 50, level 60, level 70, and then anything past that would just be any kind of like special overblown type of levels that, you know, if a person's playing that long, then obviously, you know, you want them to progress. Along with that, I have, you know, you can specify a maximum range for the scale for the actual amount. So if you want this to be, you know, scaled down to 200 for the attack, that's what it's going to use for its range when it's calculating attack, and it's probably going to have a very slow progression as it goes up to its max, where the maximum should be around level 99. Huh? Maybe I made it 200. Oh, this is also determined by the scale. So this right here should be the maximum stat based on this. So if this curve does not go up high enough, then it won't be able to feed that stat progression as much. So I think natural log 2 is the highest you can get. But see how it's capped because of the stat in general. So it can't go up that high on this curve because we only capped it at 200. So if we change this to about 999 where it was before, this stat has the ability to increase higher as you drag the power of the natural log up and down. And any class has to be linked to a class blueprint, and that's what I showed in the previous videos about all your class information for the animation blueprint that's just using to what animation and combos and skills that are going to be attached to the player or attached to that blueprint. Mind you, the actual name of the blueprint is Warrior, but since we access everything as a class reference, we have to put Warrior _C. So whatever the name of your blueprint, _C should be what the class name is. And currently, anything in my system that will access a blueprint in this way, it has to be in an RPG Engine, the RPG Engine TK folder under Actors. If it's not under there, then it will not find that blueprint. So you can change this path, but you will have to change this path in a few places because I have not made it to where it is a globally defined path. I probably should change that, but for right now, that's where the files have to be for it to be able to find your class lookup when you get back into the engine. Along with this, you can also do simulated battles. So if I wanted to see what, you know, this warrior class would do, how it would do against another warrior class at a different level, I can come in here and do a battle simulation, which pretty much takes a generic battle calculation and tries to, you know, simulate the battle damage. And this is base class. It's only going to do base class stats. There's no armor involved. There's no added attributes because of an actor. This is just a pure class versus class simulation. So you can see how a class would do against another class at a completely different level. And as you can see, you know, it's 2 hits to 1 hit to kill, which is an enormous amount of damage on this poor little level 3 character. But, you know, I can bring it down to a level 3 versus 3. So it takes about 31 hits, which could be even easily offset by equipments and things like that when you actually get into the meat and potatoes of your character. And mind you, this damage to kill is based on the physical damage, not the magical damage, if I believe correctly, if I can remember correctly. You can see how much damage that you are doing on the target and how much magic damage you would do on the target based on your current stats that you have set up here. Accuracy and things like that, it's calculated as well, along with, as well, you know, it shows you how much crit rate you will have, what your average crit damage would be if you crit it. And then this will tell you down here the enemy versus you, so that way you know how much damage you're going to take. If the enemy critted you, how much it would do, how often the enemy would crit against you, how often the enemy evaded your attacks within the sample rate, and the sample is just 1,000 battles, so it should give you a good, you know, average of what you're expecting from when you actually put that character into the other system. Let's see, I'm gonna cancel that. Oh, another thing is, you don't have to do it against the current one. If you have other classes, I could have sworn I had a... One second. Let me make sure I'm not crazy here. I might have did that on purpose to see how a class would do against itself. But it might just be in another page where I have a class versus a separate class. Okay, I'm just going to verify this real quick. Okay, there must have been something weird with the loading of the... Since I went from one database to another, I'm thinking it did not replicate this column properly. So I just had to close it and reopen it so it can populate. So if you wanted to have a warrior face off with a mage, you can do your simulation like this if you already have the other class done, and see how you fare against the other actual, you know, the other actual class. So if we go up to actors, here you can define your hero or villain actor. When it comes to actors, by default, these actors could appear in cutscenes, but these actors could also be at one point joining your party. May not be a permanent resident, but if they join your party, they have to be defined here. And even for cutscenes, you can have an actor that is not part of your party ever actually be part. If you define them here, they can actually be set up with certain armors and weapons and things like that, so they can appear differently in certain cutscenes. because the cutscene actor that I have will go here. It will load the information for that actual actor along with all his weapons, class information, and armor. And if it is type of a type of armor that actually appears on the character, it will show up in the cutscene when you actually use that character. So you define your hero's name. You also point it to the actor data that you have in Blueprint that defines more about that actual character. You can give additional stat bonuses to a certain actor. So even if an actor has S level type of stats, you can add more to that, or you can give them more stats to something that they that base class would normally be kind of like an F rank in, to bring them up to about a D rank in stats. You can do that here. This gives you more flexibility from the base class definition to an actual actor that's going to be part of that class. So that way you can have two different warriors if you want to, but this one may have more defense, this one may have more HP, blah blah blah. To be able to change the class, you can just click the class drop down. If you have weapons defined, you can also click that as well. I just have these general equipment slots for equipping in general. This can be changed in the database. Right now, I just tried to pick a little bit, a few generic standards that may appear. Same thing for the equipment: head, body, belt, legs. Most of those, I've gotten those attributes from playing MMOs most of the time. So I just added those here as like general defaults that should hopefully cover the grounds of most of what most people are actually making for their game. But there's always people that's different and things like that, so have at it. You can also do from your actual actor to an actual enemy check here. So since enemies, just like an actor, will have added stats already added to themselves, you can get a better representation of your actor fighting a certain enemy type, and how that battle statistics will change based on how you're attacking. Because as you can see here, we do good with melee attacks, but magic damage, because of our current stats, are pretty poor. We're not going to do much magic damage from them. But it also looks like we don't take that much damage, but we're level 3 and it's level 1, so obviously we're going to have some kind of advantage. Let's see, what can I find? The next thing would be items. And item definition is just pretty basic right now. I tried to add as many little things that could be actual attributes for defining an item. What type it is. Does it affect HP, MP, SP, a group of those? Does it have something to do with life? Does it do damage to an enemy? Does it perform a certain stat boost or a status ailment in general? Or is this item a key item? I do know that for actual key items in general, for like, keys and things like that, I've made that into a resource. But I still have the key item here for normal items. So that way, if we want to use key item as some notation to a actual item that says, hey, you can't sell this because you need this for a quest. So we're going to mark this item as a key item, even though it's a regular, a regular usable item that says you cannot sell this because it's marked as this type. These are a list of all the status elements, be it basic damage, poison, blind, all these other different ones, or if they remove certain status elements. Life in general is life, so you can use that as a trigger for a revival if the item that you're using is of that type. You can choose what type of target that you're going to use the item on, be it, a personal item that you can only use on yourself, to a party member, to all party members, only on dead enemies, dead party members, etc. You can use it to be able to have, if for some reason you don't automatically learn your skills and you want to have it to where you have to go to a store, buy an item with a certain amount of money or whatever, and get an item that will learn you that skill, you can use that to actually learn a skill from your skill tree, however you have it set up. You can use it to learn a summon. I have no idea why I have Mega Guard in here as a summon. I might have to look that up to figure out why I have that. Actually, I might have that as a summon. You have status. You can mark an item as having some kind of status bonus. So increase speed, attack, defense, blah, 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 blah. If you want to have some kind of HP and MP tick over time, you can set it to recovery. Again, the only thing that I've actually implemented in here is an HP item that gives just basic HP depending on the effect value or the percentage value, because there are a plethora of things that can be in here, and because you can most likely change any of this that you want, I pretty much went to the bare minimum of implementation for this, so that way you can modify the system however you want to and implement the attributes and how those attributes will actually be effective to your actual party, or a member of your party, or an enemy in general in your system. I also mark what type of animation that you use when you actually use the item, and that's just an extra little thing. Right now I only use the item use animation when you use an item, so it's not really using this drop down. But if you, for any kind of reason, if you want to use different animations for a certain item and you want to be able to detect that on the blueprint side, you can add some columns to this field as well. And again, all of these fields right here are changeable upon making a new database by coming up here excuse me, by coming up here and simply just adding a new column or removing whatever columns you want. So these are all the little types that we have for actual items. And right now, inside of the C++ side, on the engine side, I've actually made a enumerator that will actually match these same enums, well, these same variable types. So that way, when I bring it in, these are going to be just numbers between 1 to 10 or 20, however many you put in here. So I try to remap those to an actual enum, so it's easier to split operations for a enum type in the blueprint than it is to try to process a number in general. And that's the same thing for any of these that you see. They all have their own little enum systems back inside of the C++. So if you change this, just go find the enum of the similar name. You should be able to find this exact name inside of the C++ side and find the enum where these are defined, and you can change it however you please for your system. Let's see. Let's go back. Along with items, for items inventory, for items, equipment, and armor, and weapons in general, they have a resource list. And this resource list is a pseudo crafting type of setup, and all it does is take anything that we have in resources and adds it to this list on the left, and then anything you want to be able to say that, hey, I can take an apple and a plasma to be able to make a potion. That is something that you can use within your engine to be able to however you want to do your crafting, to be able to say, hey, I have these resources, I have this formula, let me craft the potion from this list. So you can have all the data you need there to be able to do lookups in your items or your inventory or your resources to try to see if you have the right resources to be able to craft a certain item. Again, I don't have an implementation of this, but it's available if you want to use it, it's there. It's part of getting the basic structure of an item. You can find out what its crafting list is, and you can use the array that's in there to find out what IDs that you need to look up in the resource ID list to find out what ingredients you need to make a certain item. And again, same thing with the resources. If you want to make a new resource or a key item, in case for like this is marked as a key item. This will be a key. The key can be bought for 20. It can be sold for 5. You have a maximum of 99 in your inventory. The inventory icon link, you can put one here if you want to. When it comes to actually putting a link in here, if we go to any texture that's in the system, my controller is on the floor, so I'm looking at the ceiling. Let's stop that. If we go and look at any texture that's in here, so anytime you right click a texture and you go to copy reference, what it's going to do is copy the, it's going to get the actual reference of that texture within the content browser space, and you can paste that here. And what this will do is when you load this resource, if for some reason you want to specifically define a texture for this item in your inventory, you can put that here and it will see that it's there and try to load it based on its pathing in your content browser and load that into your icons in the actual engine. If you leave it blank, then it's pretty much going to give, I think, basic icons depending on the type of resource it is here. So if it's a metal, it's going to use a metal icon. If it's cloth, it's going to use a cloth icon, so forth and so forth and so forth. But if for some reason for certain items you want to have a special icon, you can put that here as well. And give it a description. For weapons, for anyone that used it before, they can tell that weapons is missing a lot of things here. That's because previously I tried to add too much to the system to be able to define a weapon, which, you know, it had slots for ammo, for durability, for so many different things that can define a weapon that it was overblown for what it was. Which is why I stripped it all out from the database. And if you want to extend the weapon data object in Blueprint, you can extend it and add whatever parameters you want to that extended version to be able to represent your extended data for an actual weapon. So right now, the base weapon has base links to base stat information, base sale and cost price, base level information, who can equip it, and again, what Blueprint is going to link to. So just so I can show this here, this is called slave data. If I come over here to the Blueprint, inside my RPG Engine TK, I have a blueprint called system data. Now note, it does not have the _C on it. If you copy reference, actually I do believe this is where it is. So if I copy reference, sorry, I'm off screen right now. Okay, I lied. I thought that copying reference, I'm going to bring this over here. I thought that copy reference would show you the _C, but this is just pretty much saying this blueprint of this blueprint class, you still have to define the _C at the end of the actual name for that object for it to be able to find it inside this system. So make sure that even if you put the blueprint name here, it must have the _C on it for it to find the blueprint class to be able to dynamically link that blueprint in the in the engine side. Let's see. Of course, weapons have, you know, designated slots for the main, offhand, projectile, special. You have your crafting list over here that you can use. You have added you have added attributes that will be added to the player when they equip certain weapons. Same thing with the armor. It's set up the exact same way, except for, you have different armor types. So is it a head item, body armor, a special type of equipment? For my game, I use mostly special because I don't really have body armor or anything like that. So most of my other equipments that may be visible will be a special item. I actually didn't link this to a blueprint. That... How can I put this? Because the system can be used in different layers, 2D or 3D, you don't necessarily have to link an armor data to a blueprint. The blueprint only specifies additional attributes if you need additional attributes, and it can specify mesh information for your character. If this is a ring or something that doesn't necessarily show up on your character, and you don't have any other special attributes that you need to use, you can just virtually define your armor or weapons here, and then when your character equips them, they just become stronger in general. So it's just, hey, this data asset says I should be this much stronger. Equip it. There you have it. So it can keep things a little bit clean when you're dealing with a lot of different items. Summons. I actually do have a summon here. I never did finish the summon. And I actually crashed. I must have made a database change after I did this. This is another note. If you do make database changes in your system, and you only change the database and you don't change the editor here, it may crash when it's trying to load a column that doesn't exist in that data. If I can look at this message real quick. It does not show me the error. Okay, let me cancel this and get back. But I'll have to push another build to fix that, so that way I can make sure that if someone's trying to edit the initial release database, that they can actually edit it properly without it having any kind of issues. I'll see if I can push that out today. But let's see. I technically should be able to still delete the object and recreate it. So if I make a new summon, I can give it a name. I can give it a class link here. I can also link it to an actor object that will, specify its physical attributes, like, what the mesh will look like and things like that. I can also link it to an image, so that way if you have a summon in your inventory or a summon in your summon tree, that you can have a icon that shows up for the actual summon. Because it's a class, you can also automatically link it like an actor. You can add additional attributes to it. You can change its level, and you can do, simulated battles against enemies, so you know how much damage your summon would do to the other enemies. Mind you, if you say level 8 here, but this is level 1, you just have to change this to 8 because it's not a direct connection to what you said here. This is just to test out, hey, if I did want to make it stronger or have it to where my summons can level up, I can do simulations for that here. Let's go to the next one, monsters. So here you define monsters. With the monsters in general, same as before, you can bind them to an actor definition or actor data definition. similar to this same actor information that you can link to other actors. This is pretty much define the mesh for the character, things like that. You can assign a race to it if for some reason you want to put races there. You can add, you can give it different classes, specifications. Its level, drop rate, rare drop rate, how much money it'll drop when you defeat it, how much EXP rewards. This should probably be 200 in general. And it's also it's an additional stats. Now, one thing that you can do that I did not, as I was saying in one of the other videos, for the hero actors, they can be set to AI tactics, but it's not implemented. Enemies, on the other hand, are assigned AI tactics, of which you can pull from the enemy, but right now the base AI tactic that I'm currently using for all enemies are balanced. If you want to, you can go and get this information off an enemy that is loaded into the system and set that to the AI tactic, so that way they will use some kind of intelligent logic to be able to decide what their next move is going to be in general. But by default, I'm just using balance as their general attack strategy. You can mark an enemy as a boss if you want to use something special to show some kind of special HP bar if you're fighting a boss or something like that. You can set certain item. Sorry, I'm trying to get my words correct. You can set certain item categories as rare drops. Unfortunately, I don't have this as a per item basis, but this is just a general flow for just stuff in general. What else? Standard attack distance and the attack cone is pretty much not needed anymore in the system, since the skills and spells specifically can say, hey, you need to be this far away from the enemy before you can attack and all that other stuff. As well as the cone radius is determined by the animation notify that you put into the system. So this is not needed anymore, and I probably should remove that in the next iteration. And of course you have the battle simulation, which would do one monster versus a class. I know it should be technically versus a certain actor, but in general you want to know how this monster would fare on the general terms of an actual class. If you want it to be based on the actor, you can just go and copy the specific code that I have over in the other system that has, you know, enemy versus class or class versus enemy inside the actual actor panel. Here, because right here I do player versus enemy, but in the actual generation of an actual enemy, I just did the enemy versus class, so I can get some general data of how the damage is going to be, because that's going to completely change versus any other type of it's going to change depending on any armor type or anything that the person may have on in general. So I want to see and make sure that, hey, this will be okay going against this certain class type, and it won't be too overpowered, or maybe I want it to be overpowered against a certain class type, because maybe his AI tactics is, hey, I'm going to attack the mage, so I want to make sure that if it does attack mages, then it can do pretty good substantial damage without being overpowered. But if a tank steps in the way, then you're not going to be able to hurt that tank. So that way I can make sure that it'll be able to execute its job at trying to go after a mage and kill a mage if it has to. But if a tank gets in the way, hey, that's going to cancel out that, you know, mechanic in general. Monster groups is what I use currently for excuse me. Monster group is what I currently use for event triggers. So you can have an event trigger that spawns battle, and from that spawning of a battle event, it can say, hey, I want monsters to appear at this waypoint, that waypoint, and this waypoint in the field. And then what I say is, hey, I want group 1 to be on point B, group 2 to be on point D, and group 3 to be on point A. And I can specify within those groups what type of monsters are going to come out of those groups with this information. Note, you can use this any way you want. This is just how I was using it in general. So, you know, go in, have fun, completely change whatever you need to change, but at least you have a system to be able to create monster groups, create enemy groups, however you want to define that, and, you know, have fun with it. Maps. Maps are used just to define your general information about a map, what waypoint you're going to go to, what level it's going to actually load, what physical level it's going to actually load, and what persistent level it's going to actually load. Well, so I say level stream instead of persistent level. What level stream it's going to load for when you go to the actual map. You don't necessarily have to use this, but I eventually want to be able to make some kind of system to where you can track events across multiple maps using this, because I should be able to make some kind of branching linked list system to where if you're in one map and you know that you have to go to another map for a quest, then I can show something on the map that has a little star on it that says, hey, your quest is through this warp gate over here. So that way I know that this warp gate is linked to this warp gate that's linked to this warp gate that has that quest within that map. That takes some time, but that's one of the things I want to make. Okay, so events. I don't really have those many events in the system because there's a lot of things that the Unreal Engine does, and for those that are used to using RPG Maker and things like that, they should be able to understand what that means as well. These are just general must-haves that I've seen for, you know, trying to put together a scene that, you know, this can't be really done in the engine. I have to have some kind of thing that can trigger this, that can trigger all the rest of the things I need to do. So these are like the default events that I have in the system in general. You can add and remove party members. You can add and remove items to the party. You can give and remove money. You can set up stores. And right now you can pretty much, you can't mix store types. I just have it to where you can select an item store, a weapon store, refresh the list. Those are the weapons. You can have an armor store, refresh the list. There's no armors in the database, so there's nothing to choose from here. And you can have a resource store where you can buy resources. However you want to set this up, you can. You just select which actual item store type you want. Select the inventory you want to be at that store. Save it out. You also can do filters based on level, based on cost. And you can give the store a special greeting if that's what you want in your game as well. And cancel that. Gaining EXP, there's technically within the EXP the abilities to say, hey, I want to remove EXP, but I have no way of doing a de-leveling system and recalculating the stats. There's something that I personally don't want to use, but if for some reason you want to be able to have a de-leveling system to be able to remove EXP from from the party members and have them de-level, it's right here and available for you. There's a handling case inside of the actual blueprint for that, but I don't do anything with it if you try to remove EXP. As I said before, there's the weapon store, armor store setup. You can set up an inn. Now within the inn, you can set a message. You can set how much it costs to to heal an enemy per to heal a party member per party member in your party. Sorry about that. This can change, so if you want to have different end types as you progress through the story, and it just get progressively more and more and more expensive to be able to go to an end, you can do that here. You can set what a time advancement you want to have inside of an end. So if for some reason you don't want the time to keep going forward every time you go to an end, you can set it to 0. But if you do, you can always change it here, and then when you go to the end, it'll automatically forward the time a certain amount of hours based on what you put in here. There's also the cost of revival per character, and the same thing, there's another penalty if you want to say that, hey, if someone's being revived from, death or whatever, or unconscious state, you can add more time penalty to advance the time if your world is time based, and different quests activate at different certain times depending on what time it is in the world. Of which is why I do have a setting here to say when an event is supposed to start and end. I do not have this implemented, but if for some reason you do need to specify that a quest is available at this time and ends at this time, I have markers in here where you can mark that inside of the data for an event, but you will have to go through and do whatever little checks you want to do ever so often to be able to check to see if your event should be alive and active before you can click an NPC. Or if you just want the NPC to not show up at all when it's not the correct time frame. But that's up to you and how you want to implement it. You can also make sure that an event is automatically enabled or disabled by this check mark here. Certain quest lines and things like that you don't want to have enabled, so you would say, hey, just disable this until some other event quest enables you. Movie just simply plays a movie. If I can edit this. See here, similar to the texture that I showed before, if you right click on whatever movie you want to play, it can come in, it will try to load a movie if this is a proper movie reference to the actual data type for a movie. It'll get the movie, load it up into the system and play it on screen. Note, these movies don't have sound. Well, these movies will not play sound. I know there's something special that you have to do in the engine to be able to get your video to actually play sound at the same time as it, and it's something to do with the media source file and how they have it set up now, that you have to set up special things for the sound to work. So that would just be a little bit more effort you have to put on that side to be able to get your pre-rendered video to be able to play with sound in the engine. Let's see. You have a save point. Save point is just pretty basic. You just tell it whether what message you want for the save point, if any, and whether it should have the ability to load a game at that save point. Character customization. I had it to where you can do character customization event for a specific character. Because of the nature of it, I removed that, and now whatever current player is currently active in your character customization, it will automatically load that character as the first actor you can start doing character customization on, and then you can automatically switch to the next party member that's in your party to do character customizations on them as well. So in some later date, or if for some reason you do want to have a specific character thing, that's here. But if people don't want it, I can remove it easily. These are the different audio types that you can play. If you come in here, same thing. You right click on the asset, you copy the reference and paste it in. So that way in the engine, we can load it up by a string reference and find the class object and load that actual pointer to that object that you want to play. And with these, you can play it within the different audio levels that we have within the Play HUD, which has an interface playback, an environment playback, voice, and game. So that way you can do different effects at different control volume levels by the end player via events in general. Just know that game audio is also changing the mood of the environment. So if you have like a happy silly little map that you're in, and it has little happy music, and you want to change the mood of that city to something serious or more mellow, you can do it via this event trigger, and this will change the actual current mood that's loaded into this. That's loaded into the city. All right, let's see. Changing the time of day is just pretty straightforward. You come in here, you change the time of the day that you wanted to set to, and it will change it there when it triggers that event. Again, weather change is not implemented into the system, but if you want to change the weather, these are the basic defaults I have in here for weather change. So if you want to be able to route some kind of weather change in your system, in your environment, to be able to use these triggers, you can pretty much detect it and send out some kind of event that says, hey, I want the weather to change based on this. Move to teleport is just, moving the party to a waypoint that you have in the map. This can be used for just like simple transitions. So if you go up to a palace, you go into the palace, and then at the end of the cutscene, you're at the front of the palace. And if that's in the same map, then you can set up that information right then and there in general. Mind you, events do not go through maps. So if you start an event on one map and it says, hey, go to this next map, the event is not, the event stack will be cleared. And what you can do is, once you finish that event before you trigger the map sequence change, you can create an event that is map triggered. So that way, if for some reason your zone trigger event says, hey, we're going to be moving to this map at this location, what you can say is, hey, when we enter this map, if I have an active event, hold on, I'm saying this wrong. What you can do in here is you can create a new event called, testimony continued. So you can have testimony continued part 2 or whatever. That can be the name of the event. And you can say, hey, this is a main story event. This will be part of the testimonial chronicles. So now you have this specification for the event, and you can say, hey, this is triggered on a map change. So if we come into this map and this event is enabled, play it and start activating that event. So that way you can have a event go from one map to another, and just have that transition after you go to that map, enable the other event. And mind you, the enable event will have to come before you say zone to another map. Because when you say zone, that's it. Everything is destroyed in that map. All the event triggers are reset, and then you go into a new map with everything is freshly loaded. So let me cancel this real quick. All right, so going off that example, if I have this cutscene, at the end of this cutscene, I think it's the jump back flow. At the end of this cutscene, I have a piece where I say teleport to CSN. So if I said, instead of having the teleport here, I have a zone trigger. Move to level. and I say, hey, I want to move to this level in this event. And let's say I move this up and then delete this. I'm not going to delete it, but this is just an example. As soon as this executes, none of this is going to actually activate because this ends the level. This cuts off everything in general. So if for some reason I wanted to do that, I would make sure that this is moved all the way to the bottom. And right before I do that, I say, hey, I want to add a enable event. And I want to enable, you know, event ambush. And I want to make sure it's enabled. And I want to move that up in the event list. So now it will set the next event in the quest to enabled, and then we'll execute the zoning process. So that way everything will process, will trigger the next event to be enabled. I mean, technically we should also disable our current event. I said that wrong. There we go. Disable. We want to disable our current event, enable the next map event, and then leave. And if you do not disable the current event you're in, it will not, it has a possibility of re-triggering, which leads me to my next point. You cannot disable the current event that you're currently working on until you at least save it at least once. So if I create a new event, it doesn't exist in this column over here until I save it. So if you just simply save and then re-edit it, you can then go in and add a trigger to say, hey, disable myself once I'm done. So that way you can't possibly, you know, accidentally disable the other trigger. I mean, you can't possibly activate that quest again, or that portion of the quest. Usually when I do linked quest or linked events, I will go through and, you know, plot it out. Of course, I would have like my whole like game description saying, hey, this is a quest here, these are the different parts of the quest. I will come over here, create a single flow for them so they can stay together within their flow environment in the list, and then I would load them. I would go in and create all the event title names, save them out, so that way when I go and actually add in the event flows for those events, I don't have to worry about going out and saving and reloading to be able to say, hey, I want this event on, this event off, this event on, this event off. Let me delete these that aren't needed. Alright, so now this is the events for the sequence. I've shown this off before. Pretty much when I process a sequence, hold on, did I delete something else? I do believe I deleted something else by accident. I'll just make sure I don't save this. So in a sequence matinee, you have the name of the sequence, which is just in the level itself, whatever you name the sequence in the level. That's the name that you want to put here, a colon, and the frame you want to start at. When you're dealing with the sequence, you can easily use it to pause, stop, and continue using what I showed inside of the event sequence video. And then you can use this to be able to make sure you go straight to the frame you want to start that that event sequence at, so you can have a proper flow in your sequence playback. Again, I have dialogue here. You can enable certain attributes to a dialogue. I don't use any of these currently in the example that I have, but they do, all these little things do work. It has it to where you can come in and you can gray out the background. I usually use this when I use character billboards for like a date sim type of cutscene, where you have, you know, just the characters right behind the dialogue window. So they're just billboard characters with maybe different actor cutouts that I have here that shows different emotions and things like that as you go through dialogue. Um, and you can specify where you want your character cutout to be. If you want them to be standing to the left, to the right, or to the center of the screen. Whether you want to remove them from the left, the right, or the center, or just remove all character billboards. You can add in dialogue for the actual to go along with the actual text. There's checks in here to where if you want to force the player to get to the end of the dialogue before you can actually activate the next step in the process of the event, you can stop them and force them to wait there by checking that. If for some reason you have if you have a background specified, you can use special transitions to go in and out. Once the transition is done, then it will show the end result. So if you want the screen to fade to black and then show the background image, you can do that. If you want to remove the background, you can do that. If you just want the background to just appear instantly, you can say no transitions, and then whatever background image you have will be loaded into the background of the environment. Well, not the environment, the background of the widget, the event widget. If you wanted to use an emoticon on the corner of the dialogue that they do in most old style RPGs, you can do that here as well. You can specify the person's name, what they say, and whether you want the text to auto flow to the next event when they say something. Well, should I say auto flow to the next event once the text has stopped, has finished displaying on screen. I'm sorry, I'm still sick a little bit, so talking is starting to hurt a little bit. I'm trying to see if I can finish this real quick. Cancel these changes. Cancel those changes. All right. Ambush I never really used, but I was gonna have another. I was gonna have a boss show up in a cutscene and then you have to fight them, but I never got around to it because 4.21 came out. But it's similar as the other cutscene. You have a cutscene, dialogue happens, it spawns enemy targets. Once the enemy targets spawn, it actually has to you actually have to defeat all the enemies before the event can continue. Then you start more dialogue and another matinee, of which it then disables this current event and re-enables the next one to happen. And then you go on to the access game trigger, which will send you to another map in general. But this was pretty much an example of a quest line. This is just a very basic one. I think I covered everything that is here. Hopefully this helps other people out. Again, the building layout is experimental. I mean, it works, but it doesn't work to the point where I want it to be at yet. This is an initial page. If you want to start a person with a certain number of items or starting potions or something like that, you can do that here. You can set up your starting party list by just moving them over to the side or removing them, however you want to have it. That's about it that I can think of. Have a good day.